Welcome back to Newsmakers. I'm Ted Nesi. Tim White is on assignment. Our guest this week, Massachusetts Congressman Jake Auchincloss, Democrat, who represents the 4th District, which stretches from up in Newton, your territory, all the way down into Fall River, all of Fall River in the new one, which we'll talk about in a little while. But I want to go to the war in Ukraine. You've spoken out a lot about that, and you served in the Marines, so you've served overseas and thought about military policy quite a bit. We've seen the White House push back this week at reporting in the New York Times about the assistance the U.S. is giving to Ukraine in targeting Russian generals, sinking that big warship. It would appear the pushback is because they are worried about widening the war, especially as Vladimir Putin seems cornered. How big a concern is that for you as we head into, we're heading into 3-4 months of this war?
Well, the administration is being statesmanlike here. The first rule of Fight Club is you don't talk about Fight Club. The administration is not going to be talking about everything it's doing to help the Ukrainians. But suffice to say that when it comes to firepower, when it comes to training, and when it comes to intelligence support, the United States is going to be in lockstep with whatever the Ukrainian forces need to fight back against this unlawful invasion. The war took a turn on April 19th. It pivoted from an attack on the capital, where it was more a war of a maneuver, to a Russian focus on the east. They are trying to annex the Donbass and dismember Ukraine. They're trying to landlock the country and be able to declare that the populations that are Russian-speaking in the east are really going to be functionally subject to Russia. That cannot stand. It needs to be the bipartisan policy of the United States that our objective is total and complete victory for a free and democratic Ukraine and defeat for the Kremlin.
But, and some would say, well, then perhaps we have to start thinking about a point where we authorize U.S. and NATO military action in Ukraine. I know everyone instantly says that's World War III, and also on some level, we already are quite involved, even if there's nothing official there. Balancing the risks against what you just said should be the goal. Could you ever see reaching that point, or are the risks just too high? But then if the risks are too high, do you end up in this stalemate where we can't quite do enough to push Ukraine all the way to victory?
Direct U.S. military intervention is escalatory and is not at this point necessary. The two most important things we can do to support Ukraine right now are, one, a blank check for materiel, intelligence and training support, which we are providing. And every classified briefing I've received has improved my confidence that anything that the Ukrainians need and can use, we are providing, and our NATO allies are doing likewise. And number two is to coordinate a global blockade on Russian oil exports. Oil money is fueling the Russian war machine as they commit atrocities in Ukraine. The United States and Canada have stopped importing Russian oil. Europe is moving towards stopping importing Russian oil. And now, working with our European allies, we need to wield primary and secondary sanctions to prevent China and India from picking up that slack. Our goal should be to get Russia from exporting about 8 million barrels a day down to being able to export only about 4 million barrels a day. That will have seismic impacts on its ability to fund not just its government operations back home, but more importantly, its military operations in Ukraine.
And yet I picture Vladimir Putin in the Kremlin. He's already, we know by all reports, a paranoid individual to some extent. We saw him take this step that many Russian elites apparently didn't think he would even go to war here. He keeps at least alluding to the use of nuclear weapons, which he has quite a few of. I guess how do you think about that? The risk of Putin, the madman theory that he could just do something that we don't expect or that we fear he might do because we're winning or Ukraine is winning with America's support.
Anytime you're engaging with a nuclear-armed country, their threats need to be taken seriously. But we are not going to blink on what our objectives are. The Kremlin understands the repercussions of using nuclear weapons. And Joe Biden's statesmanship over the last 5 months has improved our credibility on the world stage after the disaster of the 4 years of the Trump administration. And we are now able to stand with our NATO allies and make very clear the iron resolve of the West that Ukraine is going to be free, democratic, and sovereign, and that this type of might makes right foreign policy just doesn't have a place in the post-war international rules-based order.
One more on Ukraine. You were one of the few Democrats who was willing to speak out pretty strongly in defense of the withdrawal from Afghanistan, where you served when that happened, although you, I think, too, acknowledged it could have gone better, the pullout. There are Republicans in particular, but I've heard some Democrats and military analysts say that decision may have led Vladimir Putin to underestimate U.S. resolve in Ukraine and potentially invade the country because he thought America's done with these foreign interventions. They're not going to be willing to do that. What do you think of that theory, that the Afghanistan pullout may have given the wrong impression of Putin and part of how we ended up here?
None of us, experts, can get inside Vladimir Putin's head. It's clearly a deranged place. And given that he lied face-to-face to President Xi just weeks before his invasion, I think we should all be very, very humble in our ability to predict what his cost-benefit calculations were. What I can say with absolute certainty, though, is that the ability of Americans to be united on this issue domestically, Republicans and Democrats alike, is critical. And the ability of Americans and Europeans and our East Asian allies to be united on a global energy blockade will change his calculations.
How concerned are you about your party losing control of Congress in the midterms?
We have to be concerned. We're facing headwinds. There's no question about it. But we have 6 months, and 6 months is a long time. We have got to be clear about what Democrats are delivering: job creation, solid foreign policy, a return to normalcy. And we've got to be clear what the stakes are. We've got a Republican Party right now that no longer believes in free, fair elections. We've got a Republican Party that is totally subject to Donald Trump's whims. The winner of the Ohio primary for Senate, J.D. Vance, was very clear that he doesn't care what happens to Ukraine. It's someone else's problem. That's not the kind of leadership that we want in Congress. That's not the kind of people we want representing us. And we're going to make very clear what the distinctions are on the ballot in November.
You know, your own political positioning, we sometimes say you're more of a moderate congressman, at least in this region. I don't know if you'd look moderate if you were held in Alabama district, but that's New England politics for you. There are those in your party who feel that those further out to the left, some of the rhetoric they use, some of the policies they've pushed, are part of why your party is having problems right now, because those messages have scared kind of voters in the middle. How concerned are you about whether the sort of vocal vanguard of progressives in your party are making it harder for Democrats to get their message across to more moderate centrist swing voters?
We're a big tent party, and there's no question that when you're a big tent party and you've got a broad coalition, one of the guiding principles needs to be that you should do no harm, that what you're saying in one district doesn't reverberate to a different district in a way that becomes a liability. I think that's just good political practice. But we shouldn't overstate the divides within the Democratic Party. There is a strong consensus towards a number of objectives that we have in the next 6 months. We want to institute Medicare negotiation of drug prices, to step up taxes on high earners and corporations in order to pay for substantial investments in clean energy and climate resilience. This is something that we can achieve, and this is something that is popular with voters. This is something that we can campaign on.
Let's talk about last year's redistricting process, where you were a winner. You wanted all of Fall River into the 4th District. I think I laughed when you said that, but you actually did get all. You said on this show last summer, and you did get all of Fall River into the 4th, despite protests from your colleague, Congressman Keating, who wanted to keep the half-ish of the city that he had. I heard from some folks down here and on Beacon Hill who thought you had pretty sharp elbows in that debate about how to redistrict Massachusetts. Do you have any regrets about how you handled that redistricting fight behind the scenes?
No, because we surfaced the opinion of residents of Fall River. The mayor, the state representative from Fall River, leaders of businesses and labor organizations all said it's important to us that Fall River be the biggest city in its district, that it be the flagship city in its own district, and that its concerns be front and center for the next member of Congress, whoever it might be. That's the right thing for Fall River, and I am proud that we got that accomplished.
But you also heard from people who thought that was naive of Fall River leaders, even if they had numerically more people, knowing the wealth, the power, the influence of the, yes, smaller population communities up at the top of the district, like Newton, like Brookline. I mean, maybe you are prioritizing Fall River, but how can they be sure that down the line they're still going to have that kind of influence if somebody wins more from up there and doesn't care as much about down here?
Well, I think population matters. That's why it's important to have the whole city in the district, because it's just more votes at the table. But also just look at the track record. Barney Frank, Joe Kennedy, me, we have all worked hard to deliver for Fall River. In the last appropriation cycle and in this upcoming appropriation cycle, I've delivered funding for infrastructure improvements for the waterfront to help economic development there. Work very closely with the mayor, with the state senator, with the state representative, because it takes local, state, federal alignment to deliver for the city, and that's going to continue to be a priority of mine.